Yeah, this football game can turn into an Oregon ASU track meet really quick with all the athletes.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll come back a little later. We'll predict that game, and we'll get predictions on all the other Pac-12 games going on. But right now, we're going to send it over to Evan and Brittany with this week's edition of Sun Devils in the Pros.
Hi, I'm Evan Wiebeck, and this is Brittany Thomason for Sun Devils in the Pros. Having arguably the best season out of all the former Sun Devils is Vontaze Burfict. He collected 7 tackles last week to go along with his 25 on the season.
Also having a great season so far is Zach Miller of the Seattle Seahawks. He's had 12 receptions total so far this season, and in the 16-12 game against the Panthers, he had 3 receptions for 59 yards.
Making his first real impact of the season, Kyle Williams caught 2 passes for 50 yards and a 45-3 win over the Bills for the 49ers last week.
The Falcons continue their perfect record as they are 5-0 so far this season. Robert James collected 2 tackles against the Redskins, and he's had 4 tackles total for the season. The NBA preseason began this week, and some former Sun Devils are hoping to make a huge impact. James Harden represented the United States in the Olympics over the summer, and he's hoping to bring home a championship for the Thunder this year.
Also looking to make an impact in the NBA this season is former Sun Devil Ike Diagu. He was signed to the Suns practice squad earlier this month and is hoping to make the team out of training camp. After Johnny Cueto left Game 1 in the ALDS with an oblique injury, the Reds added former Sun Devil Mike Leake to their ALDS roster. He made the start in Game 4, going 4 1/3 innings pitched with giving up 5 runs in an 8-3 loss to the Giants.
And that's all we have for Sun Devils to the Pros. Now we have a short break.
We rise to the challenges before us. Arizona State University.
Hello and welcome to the D-backs season recap. I'm Josh Franz, joined with Allison Cummings. We're going to go through the D-backs season and say where they were good, where they were bad, and give them their grades for the year. Let's start out with pitching. How were they this year?
Ooh, pitching. You know what? I think pitching was the main problem for the D-backs this season. Looking at the average ERA, it was 3.97, and that's not a good ERA. That's about bullpen material. And when you want to come out with wins, that's not something you should do. And another thing to look more into, comparing to the Giants, their ERA was 3.68. Much better, and they had Tim Lincecum, who was not consistent at 5.18. Another thing also, the San Francisco Giants, they had more base on balls. Okay, but the Diamondbacks, they had more runs and more hits against them. And you know what that means? They weren't finding the strike zone, they were leaving the pitches hanging, and you can't do it.
All right, I'm going to give them a C for my grade for pitching. They had a team ERA of 3.95, a team whip of 1.29. Both numbers were 9th out of 16 teams in the National League. Both were 3rd in the NL West, so right in the middle in both categories. So I'm going to split it, give them an average grade of a C. Let's move on to fielding. What grade do you give them?
Right. For fielding, much better. I would give them a B. They only had 89 errors on the season. That's a fantastic number. I mean, you want to see that from a team. But again, the pitching is what killed them. They could be making putouts. They could be fielding everything properly. But it all comes down to pitching. How many runs are given up? How many base on balls?
I'm going to give them an A+ for fielding. They had the second best fielding percentage in the National League, and tied for the second fewest errors in the National League with 89, like you said. Both at the very best for the National League. I'm giving them an A+. Now let's move on to hitting. What grade do you have for them there?
For hitting, I'm going to go ahead and give them a C. A C+, a relatively high C. Looking at all of their batting averages, nothing really stood out to me. You know, the average batting average was about 259, and that's not exactly impressive. San Francisco, much higher. They had Melky Cabrera producing for them. They had Buster Posey producing for them. Buster Posey, 336 average. No one from the Diamondbacks really stepped up and took charge, and that's why, for me, I'm going to go ahead with a C+.
Okay, I'm going to give them a B for hitting. They had the 6th best team batting average in the National League with 259. They were also 6th in hits in the National League with 1,409. Both numbers that are toward the top, but not at the top. That's why I give them a B. Now, overall for the division, overall for the year, what's your grade for them?
I'm going to go ahead, Josh, and give them a B. I felt that they were consistent through the whole year, but again, no one really stepped up. They didn't really prove they want it. They didn't want it hard enough. They didn't work for it hard enough. Next year, they're going to have to find the strike zone, and they're going to have to produce. They're going to have to put up numbers if they want to win.
Okay, I'm going to give them a D for the season from me. They finished third in the NL West. Expectations were for them to finish first in the NL West because they won the division last year, so they just weren't able to do what they wanted to do this year. So I'm giving them a D. That'll do it for the D-backs season recap. For Allison Cummings, I'm Josh Franz.
Here we go, the fun part of the show, predictions. We get to predict who we think is going to win. Let's start with the Pac-12 slate this weekend. We'll start with BYU and Oregon State. Games in BYU. Who do you have?
I have the BYU upset at home. They have the third-ranked defense in the third-ranked overall defense in the nation, and Oregon State's playing without their quarterback, so they're going to be playing with their backup. And I just think that at home with that defense, it's going to be tough for Oregon to put up points without their starting quarterback. So I think BYU is going to pull the upset at home.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a scary combination when you have your starting quarterback, who's your best player, out, and then you're on the road against a team who's undefeated and trying to make a statement. That's a tough game. I do think BYU wins that game. Next game, USC and Washington. Who do you have?
I have Washington pulling up the upset at home. I think with that crowd, we all know that Washington, the Seahawks, Washington State, and University of Washington, they all have a great crowd. 12th man called it sometimes. USC, we know that they have Barkley, Marquise Lee, and Silas right out there in the backfield. But I think that Price, Washington's quarterback, is able to use his mobility and kind of exploit some holes in that USC defense and pull up the upset at home.
Yeah, you mentioned all these Seattle teams and other upsets. I think Washington got their upset with Stanford. I think they got their Golden Tate moment out of the way. I do think USC has all the weapons that you mentioned. I think USC wins and they continue to roll. Next game, biggest game in the Pac-12 besides our game, is Stanford and Notre Dame in South Bend. Who do you have in that game?
I think Notre Dame's going to hold off Stanford at home. I think with that defense, the second-ranked defense in the nation, only giving up 7 points a game, I think that they're able to hold off Stanford. Stanford, they haven't really looked great. We saw them put up some points against Arizona last week. Not really a great Arizona team, kind of weak. And so I think that they're going to go into South Bend and kind of be overmatched by that Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, Notre Dame is one of those teams, it's like Duke in basketball. It's just so easy to hate because everyone always feels they're overranked and they always get all this love that they don't deserve. And I think this is the first year with Brian Kelly in South Bend that they do deserve everything that they're getting. I think this is the best team he's had. He's been coaching really well. They're at home. And I think this is a game they don't lose. Will they lose a game this year? I think so. I think they'll lose that USC game. But I think right now, the way they're playing, they're not going to lose to Stanford at home. So I think Notre Dame does win that game.
Yeah.
Now the big game for us, ASU, Oregon, Thursday night, blackout game. Everyone's going to go crazy. Second-ranked team against ASU. We should be ranked going into that game.
Yeah.
Who do you have?
I think Oregon's going to hold off ASU. I think it's going to be a tough game, very close. Going to come down to the end, maybe even overtime. Going to be a high-scoring affair. Hopefully not. I think for the Sun Devils to win, it needs to be a low-scoring game. The higher the score goes, the more it favors Oregon, I think. So I think Oregon's going to win it, maybe like 38-30, maybe something close, high-scoring game. But I think Oregon holds it off.
Yeah, my head and my heart have been fighting the past couple of days about this game, and it'll continue to fight going on throughout the week. There's two things that make me nervous. One is depth.
Yeah.
No one talks about the depth Oregon has. We have athletes. We have players that can run. We have athletes who can make plays. The problem is we don't have the depth Oregon does. So if someone gets hurt or something happens in this game, we're pretty much blown out of the water. So we have to hope everything stays intact throughout the game. That's one thing that worries me. Another thing is special teams. That is the weakness on this team, is our kicking game. And against Oregon, where you're going to be putting up points, they're going to be putting up points, you need to make your field goals. If you do not make your field goals, you will lose, and you will lose against a team like Oregon. That's the thing that worries me. So I'm going to go out and say that our kicking game does step up in this game. I think ASU does win by a field goal. But if they don't make their field goals throughout this game, that can come back and haunt them, and Oregon will win.
Yeah, absolutely.
So big game, blackout. I'm excited. Should be great.
Yeah, it should.
All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of Sun Devil Sports Night here from the Carson Student Athlete Center. We'll be back next week to get an extensive look on that game against Oregon. Have fun. Enjoy it. Blackout. Everyone be there. We'll be back next week. For Gabe Cordoba-Hawthorne and the rest of our SDSN staff, I'm Louis Vertone. We'll see you next week. Go Devils.